So, for the past 2 weeks since the murder of George Floyd, we've been having a nationwide debate about the role of policing and when officers should or should not be allowed to use deadly force on an individual. And unfortunately, in Atlanta on Friday night, we had another instance of a black man being shot dead by police officers. Now, I will say about this video that I'm about to show you is that it's much more controversial than some of the other videos that we've seen. But nonetheless, I think it's really important for us to watch, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit about it. And then I'm also going to show you some other angles. But here is the first angle. Oh shit. What? Damn. Oh fuck. Oh! I got it. Hey, bro, we got kids. Right. Yeah, so, I mean, as is always the case with these videos, they're never easy to watch. Never easy to watch these videos. I mean, you just saw there, Rayshard Brooks is his name. Obviously, he didn't want to get arrested. He's, having a bit of a tussle with the cops. The two officers even put together weren't quite strong enough to hold him down. And so Rayshard runs away, and as he's running away, the police officer points his gun and shoots him down and kills him, shoots him dead. And I mean, it's really difficult to watch. Now, as you might imagine, there's definitely disagreement. Some people argue that the officer was completely justified because of the fact that he was resisting arrest. And so it was justified for the officer, he's resisting arrest, he's fighting him a little bit, so it's justified that the officer shot him down as he's running away. Other people argue that that the officer was not in any way justified because you shot him in the back, you shot him while he's running away, and so it's not okay. Now, I am going to show you a clip in just a second, which does give us a little bit more context as to what was going on, and then we'll talk a little bit about the sort of backlash and some of the stuff that's going on. But first, I want to give you guys a little bit of the background to how this interaction even transpired in the first instance. So there is a little bit of conflicting reports here, so I'll try to sort of explain that to you here. But apparently, Rayshard was he was drunk in his car, and he had fallen asleep in the Wendy's drive-thru, and he was blocking traffic. So Wendy's wasn't able to. Obviously, the other customers can't come through and pick up their order because he's blocking them. So Wendy's calls the police officer. Now, it's not clear whether or not they were able to administer the breathalyzer. I've seen that some reports saying that he was resisting the breathalyzer, and that's when this interaction transpired, or whether or not he had received the breathalyzer, and then the officers were going to arrest him for DUI, and that's when the interaction transpired. But regardless, so he had fallen asleep and he was blocking the drive-thru at Wendy's. So Wendy's calls the officers, and the officers come down and they are trying to arrest him or something of the sort. And when that interaction transpired. Now, the thing though is, if you watch that video closely, you did actually see Rayshard grab the taser from one of the officers, and that's relevant for this next clip, which I'm going to show you, which some people are using to defend the officer in question. If you watch this clip carefully, you can see here Rayshard in the front there, and he turns around for a moment in what appears to be the taser and aims it at the officer. And as he's aiming it at the officer, you see the officer grab his gun. So some people are using that instance where he turns around with the taser as he's running away and fleeing the police officers to justify shooting him down. My opinion is I don't think that it justifies shooting him down and killing him. I mean, in that moment, the officer just became the judge, jury, and executioner for the whole thing, and decided to end his life over it. And it was clear that he wasn't really threatening the officer's life in any way. He just wanted to resist arrest. Like, he just didn't want to get arrested for the DUI. He just was running away, and he was probably still, and he obviously was still drunk in that particular instance. So, I don't think in any way that it justifies killing him. That said, we need to zoom out from this in order to really understand it, in order to really think about it. Because again, there's debate, right? People disagree. Some people see it and they think that officer was justified. Some people see it and they think this officer is disgusting. We need to zoom out a little bit and talk about the broader sort of implications of why there was even really police officers that needed to be there in the first instance. But first, a little bit of sort of news about how this story unfolded. The officer in question, the officer who did fire the shots, was fired after an investigation where it was determined that the officer did violate the rules. The officer did break the rules in killing him. And so you can see here, Officer Garrett Rolfe, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, has been terminated by the APD in the basically shooting of Rayshard Brooks, officer involved shooting. I don't necessarily like that term particularly, and you can see here the other officer who was involved in it but did not fire the shots. Devin Bronsan here was placed on administrative leave, and they're still doing more investigations to see what will happen. What will happen with him? So it was determined that he did break the rules. He did break the rules, and that is obviously very important context to understand there. Now, the thing though is we do need to zoom out from this a little bit, right? Because did it really make a whole lot of sense? Was it really necessary to have specifically police officers trained in the way that police officers are trained today, handling an issue like public drunkenness? Right? Like, having, one of the big issues, one of the big debates which America has been having since the murder of George Floyd is this idea that maybe not all what you might call deviant behavior, I don't know that that's the best word to describe it, but whether or not deviant behavior should all be treated as criminal behavior. I mean, again, a case of public drunkenness, it's not quite clear that you needed to send in police officers to handle that. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't send in people, and even send in people who are trained in order to defend themselves in particular instances, right? So, you need someone who can defend themselves, obviously. But you might want a different kind of person, a different agency, a different institution handling cases like public drunkenness, or handling cases like mental illnesses, or handling the different kinds of cases, as opposed to having one institution which also handles traffic, which also handles drug busting, which also handles robberies, which also handles school shootings, handling an instance of public drunkenness. Because at the end of the day, all they really needed was to get the guy to move. Now, I understand that having a DUI, like being drunk behind the wheel, is incredibly dangerous, and you've got to get him off the road, right? Like you can't be like, okay, I need you to move because he's drunk, and you can't have him driving around. Obviously, I completely understand that, and that's absolutely true. But it's not quite clear that you need to look at it as an entirely criminal offense if you really want people to reform and you really want to fix the roots of the problem, right? You need to look at it a little bit differently if you really want to be interested in fixing the problem. Now, I do want to go through and talk a little bit of the sort of overall sort of backlash in terms of what happened and how people are interpreting it. Obviously, we already brought up how the officer was fired, but you can see here, protesters obviously were not particularly happy about this. So you can see here, this is the Wendy's that called the cops on him. People were saying that the Wendy's needed to be burned down, and then there you go. The Wendy's got burned down a few hours ago because people were quite upset at what happened, obviously. And these are some pictures I want to show you, sort of pictures that kind of really capture the mood. You can see there, just the fire and how upset people are about it, and how people really feel like this was very unjust to kill someone like that while they're running away and shooting them on the back. Now, the other thing I do want to add here is that, I'm not particularly optimistic that there would be a conviction. It is possible that we will see charges pressed on the officers. I'd give it about a 50% chance that there are charges pressed. I'm not quite sure what the charges would be. My guess is it would be a manslaughter charge, although it seemed pretty intentional, so it could be a second degree charge. I'm not quite sure. It likely would. I mean, in principle, it is second degree, right? But I'm not sure that they would be able to sort of get a second degree charge. That said, I'm very pessimistic on the possibility of an actual conviction, right? Because, people are going to look at that, the juries are going to look at that, and because all it takes is one member of the jury. All it takes is one person to say, nope, we're not convicting the cop. And that's all it takes. So it's quite possible that there will be an instance in which there could be charges pressed, maybe, but I'm not particularly optimistic that there will be charges, or that there will be a conviction. So anyway, that's just sort of my opinion, some of the stuff I wanted to talk about when I saw that terrible incident that we saw. And there are protests sweeping across Atlanta. They managed to shut down the interstate, and there are additional protests popping up across the country. Once again, they were protesting outside of Richmond, and they shut down the interstate there as well for 8 minutes in honor of George Floyd. So anyway, that's the video. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.